When I was a kid, 28 Days Later was one of my favorite zombie horror movies. A weird thing to say, I know. I was a weird kid. But this was a compelling movie. A movie about the nature of man, and how ordinary people can be forced into moral compromise. It's a movie that ultimately shaped the zombie genre into what it is today. Not just for its violence and action, but for the characters and emotional core that lies within it. And of course, that continues in this film's follow-up, and that solely continues because of the sound design that functions as the key to transform this tense atmospheric film into something with emotional weight and beauty. At first, 28 Years Later feels empty and uncomfortable by design. Its wide framing traps the audience in open yet claustrophobic spaces, while harsh military cadences replaces traditional music during scenes of violence. The soundtrack feels mechanical and relentless, reinforcing a world where humanity no longer lives, but merely survives. Sound in these early scenes create emotional exhaustion, rather than excitement or catharsis. It feels disgusting, painful, and deeply uncomfortable. But then halfway through, the film changes. What has begun as a survival story between father and son becomes a story about grief and compassion, as Spike attempts to save his dying mother Isla from an unknown illness. Unfortunately, his journey is devastatingly pointless. From a practical point of view, at least. Spike journeys to take his mother to the enigmatic Dr. Kelson, where he lives in a horrifying temple made of bone and skulls. At first, the temple appears grotesque, but the film's soundscape manages to change its meaning entirely. As Isla learns she is dying of cancer, the harsh sound design disappears and gives way to a somber piano melody that slowly crescendos into orchestral music. The Bone Temple becomes this place that is no longer presented as a disgusting, horrifying monument to violence. It becomes a monument to death. A memorial to those who have suffered from the horrific plague that has devastated this land for 28 years. The emotional power of the scene comes from the interaction between sound and image. As Isla's remains are added to the temple overlooking the sunlight beyond, the orchestral score transforms this moment from something horrifying to cathartic. Through sound, 28 Years Later reframes death not as meaningless destruction, but as remembrance. And in doing so, the film argues that even in a world consumed by violence, there is still beauty in honoring the people in our lives and remembering the ones who have left it.
Love you, Mom.
In contrast, Bicycle Thieves demonstrates how sound can construct realism, and not through just orchestration, but through restraint. Where 28 Years Later uses sound to actively shape emotional meaning in heavy editing, Bicycle Thieves relies on diegetic sound and ambient city noise to preserve a sense of everyday reality, all with minimal editing. The world is not emotionally guided by a score. Instead, it unfolds through unembellished sonic detail. The hum of the city, footsteps, crowds, and the silence between dialogue. The absence of musical direction forces the viewer into a more observational role, interpreting events without emotional instruction from the soundtrack. Nowhere is this more evident than in the final scene between Antonio Ricci and his son after the bicycle theft at the end of the film. The minimal dialogue and minimal editing, combined with the weight of the surrounding silence and natural sound, creates an emotional discomfort that emerges from the realism of the scene itself. Rather than guiding the audience towards catharsis, the film leaves emotional meaning unresolved and ultimately uncomfortable. And overall, I think these two films set a really interesting precedent. Cinema here does not just show reality. It decides how we feel reality through sound. Whether it be a fantastical story about death and rebirth in a tortured world, or a realistic story about common people attempting to make a living and rebuild themselves in a post-war environment. Sound is what sets the world. Sound is what sets the emotion. Sound is what keeps us coming back. Whether it be realistic or not.